All right, ladies and gentlemen, you sexy beasts, take your seats. We are at it again. It is a Friday class. The weekend is here.
Well, it'll be Wednesday for you guys, but Friday
That's
for
true.
us.
Two more days till
Yep.
Friday.
Yep.
There we go. With me, as always, is the gentle giant himself, the Sultan of the Studio. He's a man of many talents and as many vices.
Just as many talents as vices.
That's AG over there. I'm Professor CK, and we're hitting you with another episode.
Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Thank you,
doing
Max, for that marvelous introduction.
we're doing a topic that just it warms my heart and saddens my heart all at the same time.
Can I
It's-
ask you something?
Huh.
Do you think we're ever going to run out of? I was about to say government conspiracies. Do you think we're ever going to run out of government scandals to talk about?
No, and this is just modern day shit. I mean, we're doing Iran-Contra today. Something that I feel like has slipped, for as recent as it was, has slipped way under the radar for everything else that's gone on. But
What I love
pretty
about
important.
this is it started out as Iran, then they thought something was going on with Contra, then at the very end, when it gets found out, they're like, "It's Iran-Contra."
You motherfuckers were doing this together at the same time. Yeah, just incredible. So, yeah, get ready. Get excited. A lot of passion went into this one. A lot of care and love. So, get your earphones ready or get your speakers ready and let's get it on.
All right, so Iran-Contra. Okay, whenever I heard about Iran-Contra, like growing up, I know where, and how do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it Iran, Iran, Iran?
I think Iran works.
Iran.
I don't know.
It's
their
weird because
dialect.
it's Iranian or it is Iranian.
I think
Depends
it
on
just,
if you're them or not.
Yeah. I don't know. I hope it's not one of those situations like Kiev is what Russia calls it, and Kyiv is what it's actually called, or however that works.
Oh,
You don't want to.
it looks like Kiev, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest with you, but yeah, I'm gonna go with what the Ukrainians call it. Okay, so the biggest thing for me on this, new chair alert in the studio, by the way, so I'm testing it out. Oh, I feel like it's really gonna up my informational value.
Got to.
So, I want to provide some backstory and some context, just so when we talk about these different groups, we don't have to then stop, explain who they are, and then go into that. So there's like three simultaneous things happening. So there's things happening in the United States, mostly in D.C. Then there's stuff happening down in Nicaragua with two kind of factions, political factions between the Contras and the Sandinistas. And then before that, I'm trying to remember the president before the Sandinistas took over.
Technically, it wasn't a president. It was a family dictatorship that was.
That's what I'm saying. But it was it was like supposed to look like some type of like presidency or something like that, right?
Yeah, they were very kind to America. It's odd because they were technically a dictatorship, but somehow that was a better deal than what the Sandinistas were giving. And I think it just along trade routes or along trade and different things like that. To me, it's really, really odd because Nicaragua as a whole isn't exactly like a major export player on the scene.
No,
Like they do things, but they don't do like a lot of beneficial things for America. So this strictly what happened down in Nicaragua with the Contras and the Sandinistas was just more of a fear of communism because the Sandinistas were backed by the Cubans. The Contras were, again, kind of in with the previous regime. And it was just more of the fact that the Cubans and communism and Russia kind of from afar were the Sandinista supporters, which time and time again, I don't know how many times we've talked about it, but
It was the Somoza.
samosas.
Okay, so it was the Somoza family. So where we're going to be going off from is we're not going to give you the entire history. Geographically, if you're not familiar with Nicaragua, so it is basically above Costa Rica in Central America, and then below Costa Rica is Panama, right?
Which
Okay.
is pretty big for what we talked about before.
Yes.
Mr. Manuel Noriega, whole pineapple face.
So it's still positioned completely touching both the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean and then the Pacific Ocean. So it takes up the entire kind of like route up going through into Central America.
Mm-hmm.
So Nicaragua, it was ruled by essentially, like Adam was saying, it was kind of a dictator dynasty type thing, the Somoza family. And during the revolution in Nicaragua, so the Somozas, the U.S. liked them because they weren't, basically, if you are not a communist, the U.S. just goes on your side during this entire period of time. Like, it's just like, do you like communism? And it's like, we just like to murder people. And they're like, okay, but you don't like communism. They're like, no, we hate communism. They're like, fantastic.
Do you murder people for a free society?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me get that, actually.
Yeah.
So you have the Somozas, and eventually, after all of the corrupt shit that they do, and this is like literally a dictatorship in the sense of like making people disappear that speak out against them. It's definitely full on North Korea-ish kind of that kind of shit. Like they control the media, all that.
Without a better way to put it, it is like typical cyclical South American leadership. Like South America is, as we've talked about many times before, like it's just kind of up for grabs all the time.
It's changing hands like fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
So Somozas, they get overthrown and they escape the country. Don't they escape to the U.S.?
They fled to, I don't think it was the U.S. I think it might have been Brazil.
They went south instead of north.
Could have been.
Good move. So they're overthrown by the Sandinistas. And the Sandinistas are essentially an opposing political party / rebel group or whatever you want to call them, revolutionary group. And they are more on the socialist side.
Mm-hmm.
And
the narrative pushed about them was their red communism. That's exactly what they're going to be.
That's when you hear certain narratives. If you just go for completely biased, it's just they tend to skew more toward the socialist side and everything. Well, socialism being a word that basically means communism to a lot of people in this world. America looked at that, and were the Sandinistas in power at the end of Carter's administration, or did they get into power? I want to say they were in power during the end of Carter's, and then Reagan.
It was the 80s, so it was a little bit prior to Reagan. But Reagan, he was not a fan of the Sandinistas. He was such a fan of the Contras, which what I'm about to say is going to sound nuts, but it's even going to sound even more troubling when we start to talk about what the Contras did. But he's basically made the equivalent of saying that the Contras were like the founding fathers of South America.
Yes, that they were fighting for their independence from tyranny and all this shit. Well, what he failed to mention is that the founding fathers, unlike the Contras, didn't murder people, some massacres.
Yeah, I mean, we probably did some bad stuff to the
natives.
Hold
on a second. Not to the degree that the Contras did. No. But they were also, the Contras also made some of their money by running drug smuggling. They were in Nicaragua, so it was that pipeline from South America up to Central America and the United States.
And I have absolutely no problem with their drug running things. I do have problems with kind of after this all came to light and they really took a look at the Contras.
Are you talking about the fact that Nancy and Ronald had the entire just say no war on drug shit, and he's supporting a group that he is fully aware is gaining some of their financial support by selling or running drugs at the very least.
Yeah,
into the United States.
Into our country, yeah. We'll get to Freeway Rick. But after this whole thing kind of gets settled out, it turns out that the Human Rights Board, like the people that look at the entire world, found so many violations of them either killing just regular free people that were on the street, civilians. They were rounding them up and burning down their villages while they were still like tied together in the village square. Just some real bad shit.
So at the point in our story where we're going to pivot over to either the U.S. or Iran, where we're at in Nicaragua is the Sandinistas have taken over from the Somozas. The remnants of like the Somoza loyalists basically try to kind of like form their own revolution, and they call themselves the Contras because they're the counter-revolutionaries, right?
I think that's what it could be.
Yeah, I think because counter, the C-O-N-T, and then the try. I think it was supposed to be counter-terrorist revolutionary, some shit like that.
Yeah, it's actually a faction in wrestling in a lower division right now. Yep. Yeah, the Contras.
The more you know. So as we leave Nicaragua at this point, the Sandinistas are in control of the government and the country. The Contras essentially are a revolutionary or rebellious faction that's basically launching kind of a guerrilla campaign warfare from like the jungles. And they're actually even split up into separate factions as well, both calling themselves the Contras, but having a little bit of like difference in their philosophy, I think.
It mostly backed out of Nicaragua as a whole. They're stationed kind of in the countries around, right on the borders to be able to get in. They are still in the jungles of Nicaragua, but as far as everywhere else around it, and we will, maybe we don't even need to really briefly talk about it, but old Pineapple Face Noriega, being the man that he was and being the CIA informant that he was, actually volunteered them to...
asset.
Asset, yeah, sorry. He volunteered to bring in the Contras down into Panama and actually train them and help stage them to send them back into Nicaragua.
Because we still had a presence down there in Panama, right?
We did, but Noriega was more of a...
No, he would train them, but you don't think that he would have, because he went and trained with the CIA, so he would just be, in essence, training them in CIA tactics.
Still a CIA training base facility down there.
Okay, let's pivot.
Before we get there... before anything really happens, and we'll talk about them here in a little bit, but the Boland Amendments. The Boland Amendments were Congress's way of stopping Reagan from being able to fund this Sandinista revolution, or not Sandinista, the Contra Revolution. And they were actively sending money down there.
Okay, so why is Reagan after the Contra, or why is Reagan after the Sandinistas? Why doesn't he like them?
Communism. They're Cuban. We're still nuts deep. Shockingly, still nuts deep in the Cold War at this point.
It's so crazy because it was so cooled off by then. There wasn't a lot of activity. They said by that point in the Cold War, it was at that point the Cold Proxy War. So what we were basically doing, we knew that we could not fight Russia. Russia could not fight us because it would cause nuclear war. You can't fight directly like that. So basically what we're trying to do is America and Russia are going into these underdeveloped nations that have power vacuums or can be easily swayed one or the other. And basically it's like trying to play, like pick your players. Like I want him. So you would go in and you would either, we're going to try to turn it red or we're going to try to turn it blue. So you would come in and have basically these United States backed factions, these Russian backed factions fighting for control within some of these countries.
Just a full blown proxy war.
So the whole thing with Reagan is because the Sandinistas, and I'm talking about this completely impartial until we get to the shit on our side, because we do nasty shit and it needs to be called out. And this didn't even get enough attention when it actually fucking happened. So because the Cubans are backing or at least supporting in some way, shape, or form. I think they might have been letting them train there, something like that. Probably weapons as well. But since they're backing the Sandinistas, all you have to do is say Russia backs Cuba, Cuba backs the Sandinistas, ergo communism. And so the whole point was that Reagan's scare tactics and fear-mongering were telling the American people we cannot allow communism to basically set up shop in our basement. Because if that happens, the next thing that happens is Mexico is going to become communist, and then it's going to be spilling over our borders. It's like communism is not... I'm not a communist.
No.
But what I understand is that if we have such a sound system, and I text you this the other day, if we have such a sound system and capitalism is truly the best system, as it's always declared to be, then it would just snuff out any communism, or you might have small pockets of communism within the country. I think there's still services that are like that now. Adam, what are some socialist services for me?
School, roads, literally any sort of city works,
Police,
anything like that.
Fire, all that good stuff that we fucking like.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it is just, I don't know if the word ambivalent really comes into play with what I'm about to say, but I just don't really, I mean, communism and capitalism face to face, our capitalism is really driven off of a communist society in China. Like that's where most of our capital goods have to come from.
And you told me this too, and it makes perfect sense. If both systems work how they were intended for the people to work, not by the people that can take the greatest advantage of them or make the greatest gains from them, but if they worked in a perfect way, both capitalism and communism would be extremely effective ways to live a society. Because you have communism, which would spread out wealth to everybody. I understand the whole gripe about it is like people work harder so they should make more. That can still happen. What I'm saying, though, communism, the reason it gets...
We still have oligarchs in Russia.
Exactly. The reason why communism gets a bad rap is because the government in Russia is who runs the thing. So if communism was not essentially relied upon or completely fucking hijacked by the government and it just operated, you would have essentially a society with free healthcare and everybody would be, healthier. Everybody would have a roof over their heads. All their, not luxuries, but their essentials to live life would be taken care of. We still do that in certain ways with food stamps and welfare programs and all that.
And so there are going to be people that take advantage of them always.
Exactly.
Who doesn't take advantage of literally
So neither
everything?
work perfectly. If they both did, we wouldn't be happy. It would be a hybrid communistic capitalism or some shit like that. Anyway, so Reagan is fear-mongering. We can't let them set up shop. That's why we need Congress to keep sending money to the Contras so we can make sure communism doesn't invade our borders.
Well, and, we don't even really talk about Cuba in a way that really shines a light on Cuba. But the Sandinistas did two things that Cuba did that were actually very, very good. I mean, they put in something called the Nicaraguan Literacy Campaign, and they estimated that 75 to 90% of the people outside of the bigger cities in Nicaragua
Rural.
Yeah, were all, they couldn't read. They were all illiterate.
Same thing as France.
Yeah.
Napoleon episode.
And 50% of the entire country was illiterate. By the time they were done over, I think it was a span of 3 years, only 10% of the country was still
Seriously?
illiterate. Yeah.
So, we need that here.
No shit, huh? And not only that, but they set up actual, legitimate universal health care to where the system used to be there were so many layers to it, much like our healthcare system, to
Different
where
providers, all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You can't use this person. You have to use this person.
But they nationalized it, and the healthcare down there, even to this day, Nicaragua's sort of fallen off, sort of because of the Sandinistas, the leadership that they put in.
I'm sure our influence had nothing to do with that.
No, but they still have a fairly effective healthcare system. So if we're talking about the badness of what they were doing down there, I'm sure everything wasn't rainbows and butterflies, but a lot of people could read, and a lot of people were getting
It was blown way out of proportion, it sounds like. So at that point, Reagan is petitioning for Congress to continue funding the Contras because, again, communism is bad. And at some point, Congress passes an act. I can't remember the guy's first name, but you mentioned it before, the Boland Amendment.
Our first one was 82, and the second one, because they were still skirting around the first one, came in 83.
So 82, Senator Boland submits an amendment to the floor that says the United States and any of its agencies are not to provide any funding, taxpayer funding or taxpayer paid funding to the Contras. And that was supposed to take it out. They thought that they had added enough stuff in there. And again, that's not as simple as the amendment was, but that's the gist of it. Well, looking over it, Reagan is like, we really still need to be funding. Hold on, I'm going to try to do my Reagan voice. Well, we still need to be funding these guys. Communism's bad.
It was pretty good.
Was it?
Not bad.
I've been watching a lot of fucking Reagan speeches.
He sounds like a Simpsons character.
He really does, man. So, funding is unable to go through any government agencies, CIA, FBI, Department of whatever.
And what's our next step after that? We have allies on the outside of our country, which I don't know how this ever happened, and I guess I don't know how it still happens today. But the point man running down there was a guy named Oliver North. Now, he was an NSA advisor.
Well, I want to get to Iran first and explain what's going on.
Well, there. Oliver actually does something here.
Oh, that's right. That's where he gets his practice.
Yeah.
That's good.
So Oliver is told from the...
God damn it, use his rank. It's not lieutenant. It's Lieutenant Colonel Oliver. Did you hear him say that during a Senate hearing?
Yeah. The odd thing about all this is everybody that we're going to be talking about all saw Vietnam action. Mm-hmm. So,
which was not that long ago before this. It was 10 years.
Yeah. So we're talking about these guys that were actually over in the shit that we're fighting.
This is also 10 years, when all this comes to light, 10 years after Watergate, too. So there's a lot of war and scandal hangover.
Yeah, but all these major officials all saw what fighting an endless war with really no winnable outcome was.
At what point are we going to stop just sending money? When does it become a thing where we're like, shit, now we got to send people over? That was the first war that we lost. And so, that's leaving a horrible taste.
Oh, yeah.
And Nicaragua had to look very similar in kind of situation, terrain, and all that as Vietnam, I would imagine.
Very jungleless. Yeah.
Jungleless.
So,
I like that.
jungleless.
Jungle-ish.
So Ollie goes ahead and gets word from his higher-ups. They tell him, hey, man, we still need to continue funding the Contras, so you're going to need to get in touch with your guys on the ground in Nicaragua, and we're going to have them set up a Swiss bank account.
So what was his position? What was Oliver North's position? Why was he able to do all this?
He was an NSA advisor.
Yes, he was an advisor, National Security Council. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, there's
NSC.
another... Oh, it's
I think it's National Security Advisory.
National Security Council, because it's not...
NSC.
Yeah, because what you said, what did you say?
NSA.
That's
National
something else.
Security Agency.
That's, yeah. So I'm just going to call it the National Security Council or whatever it was. It's 3 guys. And then underneath them are basically what they are, the... what's the...
A pyramid scheme.
No, what's the name of it? I just fucking spaced the name of it.
NSC.
The National Security Council. I'm just going to say the council.
Yeah.
The council's job is basically the foreign intelligence gathering arm for the White House. So their job is to appraise the president on the goings on in the world and give him updates and all that kind of stuff. All of these guys that are in this, one of them is the Attorney General, I think, at the time, and then a couple other like admirals, colonels, former military guys, I think, were also there as well.
Yeah, Robert McFarlane, we're going to talk about a lot.
He was an assistant, I think,
He was
right?
the National
Advisor?
Security Advisor to the president.
Yeah. So
Casper
underneath...
Weinberger, Secretary of State, his name's going to come up.
There you go.
John Poindexter was the man that ends up replacing McFarlane. We'll talk about him. Oliver North was basically like the point man and the fall guy
He was
for all
right
of this.
underneath those 3 guys.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys right underneath them. And so all 3 of these guys also have basically teams that are doing all this research to get them information. So North is right underneath them and operates out of this office called number 392?
I don't remember.
Did you see pictures of it? Okay, so his office was basically set up like a nerve center. And he had 3 computers, like the big ass one sitting in front of him, and they would constantly be coming in with different reports from different parts of the world. So it was like a live feed. And at that time during like the early 80s, man, like that was like top technology shit.
Nobody had 2 screens in the 80s.
He had 3, man.
I'm shocked by 2 screens now.
And he had this apparently like a light up on the wall that when like certain alerts were coming in would flash red to get his attention. So he's basically just in this nerve center and is gathering information from every possible source around the world. So he's like their main guy. And like you said, they give him the job and basically say, we need to find out a way to keep funding the Contras. And so he's kind of trying to figure this out. In the meantime, when the Bolin Act passed, do you know about the public funding, the campaign?
Mm-mm.
So Reagan was able to drum up private citizen support. I think up to the amount of, I want to say somewhere between $6 to $10 million. So between the time of the Boland Amendment that cut off the funding for the government, he was basically raising private funds to fund the Contra rebels. Basically people that were so anti-communist in the United States that would donate, thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, which there are definitely those people that make so much money off capitalism. Of course they're going to pay that. It's nothing to them.
Oh, and it's just one of those things where it's going to come back to them at some point. Like, it's not in the way that our government works, there's so much back scratching with rich donors that happens where you'll see something like a tax cut for the wealthy or something like that, where that money comes back tenfold. And so outside of just what they were raising, Ollie tells them that they need to set up this Swiss bank account. I don't know if it was Swiss or Cayman Islands.
It was Swiss.
Swiss. They secured funding from Saudi Arabia, which seems so odd that we just cannot shake Saudi Arabia. After they sent those fellas to the Taliban to train to blow up our buildings and shit like that, we're still cool with them. After Khashoggi, somehow we're still cool with them. But they pledged to donate $1 million a month to the Contra unit and ended up doubling up, I think, like halfway through that first year to where they could do $2 million. So they gave about $18 million just straight from Saudi Arabia to the Contras. But then again, $18 million to fight a war to try to take over a country, that shit's going to get moved pretty fast.
Especially when you can then reap some benefits in trade deals and stuff like that with that country because they still do have exports.
Not a lot, though. That's the thing.
You're going to make your money back eventually, man. You have a place to send people for training, or I don't know.
Or if you say, hey, America, we helped you with that, we need some of your missiles.
Yeah. What was do you got the name of the guy that was like the former Navy or Air Force dude that ended up becoming kind of the point of contact down there? That North put into power, or North put into that position?
Shit.
It would start with an S. Seagram.
Could have been the guy that he was former Air Force and then became a weapons dealer.
Yes. What was his name? If you're still listening to this, it's because I haven't taken this part out, but most likely I'm going to edit this out while we're looking.
So we sound good.
So we sound like we know what we're fucking talking about.
But yeah, he comes in a little bit later. He comes in.
Well, hold on. Let me get his name, and then that's where I'm going to start it. God damn it, man. Oh.
Siebert?
Siebert. It was something like that. Hang on. Because William Casey was the head of the FBI at the... Oh. Richard Secord. Okay.
Secord, yes.
All right, we found that so fast it just came to us. It was Richard Secord. We totally didn't take time to search that and just edit that part out. So Richard Secord was basically, he was a former, he served in the military. I can't remember which branch. He retired as like a colonel or something. He was basically forced to retire due to some shady shit. And he kind of served as North's man on the ground down there that started basically running the whole operation of getting the funding, purchasing the weapons. Oh, that's why he got forced out, because he was doing some gun running or something like that with some Canadian smugglers or something.
While he was still
active in the military. Yeah. And then he wasn't kicked out. They were like, hey, man, you got to retire. And he's like, really? And they're like, or we got to fire you. He's like, I'll retire and keep all my benefits and shit.
Yeah.
So he's then put in charge down in Nicaragua to basically get the money, gather the weapons, and just make sure these guys, logistically, he was the logistics guy. He was the guy that was making sure they had the support. Are we now ready to go to Iran?
Yeah, I think we're there. There were some other donors that were contributing, but they needed large amounts of cash fast.
They couldn't keep just getting, donors would keep, private citizens would keep doing it, but they needed more money. It was kind of, I don't know if the Contras were making much headway at this point. They were trying to get the Sandinistas out there as quickly as possible. More money probably meant more weapons and stuff, and could wrap the whole thing up. Now we're going over to Iran. Let's go back to the Carter administration just to set up a little bit of what happened leading up to the Reagan administration.
Okay.
The guy that was in power in Iran at that time was the Shah of Iran, right? I can't remember what his name is. Now, we talked about this. Ayatollah is the religious leader of Iran. The Shah is the political leader. Sometimes and you'll eventually find when they do merge together. But in this situation, you had the Ayatollah
Khomeini,
I
think his name was.
And then you had the Shah of Iran. I'm sorry, I can't remember what the Shah's name was. So the Shah was not popular.
Soleimani, maybe.
Soleimani?
I think that was the Shah.
Okay. So there is uprising in Iran, kind of like there was in Nicaragua.
Except for this time it was us.
Yes. And through some maneuverings, because the Shah was friendly for us.
The Shah came into power through the means of the U.S. government.
Oh, I thought you meant the rebellion that overthrew the Shah. Okay, gotcha. So yes, the Shah was very friendly for us. We probably had some pretty sick oil deals over there. He ends up getting deposed and fleeing to the United States. And he is then, there's like a period where there's like a power vacuum, but the guy that was basically the figurehead of the revolution was the Ayatollah Khomeini. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. That's just how I'm going to pronounce it.
Or just if it's the wrong name.
Yeah. It is. It's Khomeini.
Okay.
So he is, again, the Ayatollah, the religious leader. He then moves into essentially both the religious leader and the political leader. And at that point, the United States and him and the Shah had pretty much a different, completely opposite political ideology. And so it goes to a point where it's much more kind of open and freewheeling. They said like in the 60s and 70s, Iran and Tehran looked like London and stuff. It was just bustling with like
colors everywhere.
Yeah, colors everywhere, and like all these businesses.
Pants.
Women were able to wear whatever they wanted, and it was like fashion, all that shit. As soon as the Ayatollah gets in there, basically it goes back to like what you actually kind of stereotypically think of when you think of Iran, the very like women in
Burqas.
like, are they hijabs?
Yeah, hijabs. I think.
Hijabs. Women completely covered, more of just a traditional, like not as flashy or anything like that. And I mean, people were happy going back like that. I don't know if they thought the Western culture was corrupting kind of their history or anything like that, but there seemed to have been kind of a
They're believing what their leaders are telling them. That the
yeah,
West
exactly.
Is
I mean,
evil, and that all
the
these
flow of the
things.
information is coming from there. They're only finding out what they want them to know, especially in countries like that where like communication is not super widely available to everyone.
Yeah. Our allies had some pretty big beef with them too, because when the Ayatollah became over and or took over, the British Petroleum Company (BP) had control of a lot of the oil that was coming out of Iran. They were kind of like the major oil
Does
exporter.
that go back to like when they have possession of shit during like World War One and World War Two?
Could have been.
Where they
Could have.
still
Yeah,
had
they might have
control of
gone into
that?
there and started taking a lot of that over. And the new Shah starts really thinking about it, and he's like, well, why are we allowing you guys to make so much money when this is our oil on our land? So he starts grabbing back these oil facilities.
The Shah did, or
Yeah,
okay.
The Shah basically nationalized the oil company that was, or the oil that was coming out of
To
Iran.
bring that money back to where it was coming from.
Yeah,
Makes
which
perfect sense.
totally makes sense.
So at this point, Khomeini is in power, and when he gets into power, Jimmy Carter allows the Shah to basically seek refuge in the United States. Now, this does not make the people of Iran very happy. So what they do one day is they basically storm the American embassy, and they end up taking how many hostages
I
did
thought it
they
was
take?
like 21.
Oh, more than that, dude.
Americans weren't the only hostages. That
No,
they
they
took.
weren't.
I think all in total, out of all the thievery, it was like 140 or something. It was a lot of hostages. This is like the first.
52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage after it was a militarized Iranian college students basically stormed the U.S. embassy. So 52 Americans are taken hostage at this point. And just speeding ahead, because we're not talking about the Iranian hostage crisis, we're talking about Iran-Contra.
It'll be a different episode.
Jimmy Carter does whatever he can. I like Jimmy Carter, Peanut. He does
Habitat
whatever
for
he can
Humanity.
during this entire time to try to get these hostages freed. All this stuff goes down, and what ends up happening with these hostages is literally a day after Reagan comes into office after winning the election, the hostages are released.
And there is a little bit of conspiracy towards the Reagan administration.
Like,
maybe.
were they working behind the scenes to be, because if Jimmy Carter would have got them and they would have been released even before the election, his approval rating would have gone through the roof.
He wouldn't have been a one-term president, probably.
But to sit here and say that, like, there's that side thinking, like, well, they were scared of Reagan. They knew that Reagan was going to put up with that shit, so they got him out and released the hostages quick. No, not when Jimmy Carter had been working literally like, and they were held captive for, was it more than a year?
It was a while.
Yeah. So Jimmy Carter put in all this legwork. I think what ended up happening is that it's possible that the Reagan administration, or whatever their committee was to elect him, basically was perhaps in contact with someone in Iran and made a deal. We're going to find that deals are going to be made, so it's not crazy to think that one wasn't made prior to. That's like, hold these guys until I get into office. This will help me get in there.
One
And
day,
then once
literally just one day longer.
Yep. And once I get in there, I'll hook you guys up with some sweet shit that I'm not supposed to be doing. So those hostages get released. I'm just talking about, the reason I'm talking about that is because it kind of sets the stage. So we're going back to Iran, and Reagan is now in office. Iran and Iraq start fucking having a little tussle with each other. And Iraq is basically backed by the Soviet Union, has all these tanks and everything. This is when Saddam Hussein, basically he'd been in power for a little bit, but then he became president in name.
This is like his coming out party.
Exactly. So he's like, well, if shit's kind of going in flux over in Iran, I'm just going to go over there and try to do what I want to do over there. So the Iranians, because they don't have any backing at this point, they're fighting a losing battle because Iraq is so much more advanced than them from a military stand. They have tanks and all that shit. Well, in order to kind of level the playing field, when did the hostages get taken in Lebanon?
1983.
Okay, so that's what kind of kicks this whole thing off.
Well, prior to and before that, 1983, before the citizens were taken hostage, the U.S. launched something called Operation Staunch.
Oh, that's right.
And Operation Staunch was basically to try to persuade all the countries that would sell weapons to Iran not to.
Because they're trying to get the Ayatollah out of power.
Yeah.
It's the same thing they're trying to do with Sandinistas. They're basically trying to, except in this situation, it's basically like a
They
economic
installed their
blockade or
guy and they don't
sanctions.
want him out.
So they're basically telling all these other countries, do not deal any weapons to Iran. And the United States is the one that comes up with that to go tell everyone.
It's so ironic.
So about 7 U.S. citizens get taken hostage at different points, like over the course of a few months in Lebanon. And Lebanon is right below, geographically, it's right below and it borders Iran.
Lebanon is in full civil war as well.
Beirut's the capital. If you guys have ever heard of Beirut, it's in Lebanon.
We have forces over in Lebanon supposedly to try to keep the peace. Don't really know what that was, but we actually had a group of our military in Lebanon at the time. There was an attack that happened. Turns out that the Iran-backed terrorist group Hezbollah was the one that did it, and it turns out that
And that's where they operated. They were operating in Lebanon.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they were still backed by Iran.
Okay.
Or Iran.
All right.
So
They start taking hostages.
Yeah.
American hostages, and they take 7 in total. I know, I can't remember what all the other ones did, but 2 of them that stand out. One of them was a priest. Last name was Weir, I think. And then another one, I can't remember his last name, was actually someone that was seized from he worked for the CIA. And he was over there and was like the head of the CIA station or something like that. So he had information.
Item.
Huh?
Big ticket item. He was
Yes.
a big get.
So they need to, basically their priority, I really think, is to get this CIA guy back, because he's the first one they ask for when they're able to ask for something, because they're afraid that he's going to share, under torture, he's going to share some classified shit. So who sets up this little arrangement? I'm trying to recall.
It was some guy that was working in tandem with Robert McFarlane.
Okay. And Robert McFarlane, he's a big player in this. Basically,
He's the national security advisor to the president.
yes. So him and Reagan are like thick as thieves. And Reagan, we talked about this. He seemed like he was always looking for his car. Anytime you look, he's kind of looking around and he's not really sure what's going on. And Robert McFarlane was someone who, again, people are people. They're flawed individuals. Some people do things with the best intentions. I'm not using it as an excuse. But I think that out of this whole thing, Robert McFarlane actually had the most contrition and kind of realized how far he had strayed from what he wanted to do.
Yeah,
and I'm not using that as an excuse.
He tried to knock himself off when he realized that the shit
Exactly.
hit the fan. So he carried a lot of guilt with this.
So one thing, too, is during this time, I can't remember who he said it to, but Reagan had told either North or McFarlane, he's like, keep the Contras whole, body and soul. And at that point, the whole thing is, throughout this entire thing, Reagan says he doesn't know anything about Iran-Contra or anything like that, what happened. He ends up coming out and admitting that he was aware of a couple weapon shipments to Iran, but that he didn't know what they were for. And so, kind of getting back to what's going on in Iran, somehow we get in contact with people within the Ayatollah's party that are a little bit more moderate, that apparently the Reagan administrations think that they can try to make a deal with. And so McFarlane, Oliver North, and I'm trying to think some other advisors get fake Irish passports and fly in an unmarked plane to basically meet with these guys to negotiate to find out what can be done for these hostages. And in meeting with them, they meet with, what's the weapons dealer's name that you like so much?
My favorite guy of this whole entire thing, his name is Manager Gabanafar.
Gabanafar, that's right. So he's an Iranian.
Gabanafar is a wild dude.
So he's playing every side. He's literally a gun for hire, but he's a weapons dealer. So he's a weapons dealer for hire.
Yeah, he's an Iranian expat that is, I believe, stationed or living in Israel at the time. If you've ever seen a show on FX called Snowfall, it's phenomenal. I would recommend every episode, every season. It's just it tells kind of this whole story from a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later. His name's Freeway Rick Ross. He for all intents and purposes, supplied the cocaine into South Central LA and all over the country.
To start the crack epidemic.
Yeah, he what he does is he's just an interesting character that plays in this. But there is a guy in the show who is actually they confuse some things, but Freeway Rick's character is buying cocaine from this guy who's supposed to be
Based on
Gabanafar.
Gabanafar.
And he's just the craziest dude that you've ever seen. There's people getting shot at his house all the time for fun. He's always wearing like swim trunks and like an open flowered shirt with like a fat ass gold chain. And he's got gold
Big old
watches.
gut hanging out.
Yeah, he's the funniest dude. And Gabanafar, through all intents and purposes, like we're going to talk about, and like Chris just said, he had his finger in every pot and he made money at every turn. It was incredible the amount of influence that this guy had. And not only that, before this had all happened, like years before, through the FBI and the government, he was what was known as a burn notice. And he was basically like a do not touch, do not do business.
He had fucking burned so many bridges and like stabbed people in the back.
Yeah.
They're like, we're not gonna we will do business with anyone. We won't even do business with this guy.
And somehow he still weasels his way into this.
So basically, Gabanifar sets up this meeting with this secret cabinet or council or whatever to meet in Tehran, and they're under the impression, the council's under the impression from the United States, that they're going to be meeting with people high up in Khamenei's like administration or his party, and he ends up like Bonifar, like they're like low tier guys that he meets. Like the U.S., the people from the U.S., Oliver North brings a fucking cake.
Allegedly.
I believe the cake thing.
Okay.
It's been corroborated by enough people, McFarlane included, because he was there. So they bring
It's
this
just
cake.
so fucking dumb.
I know, but just listen. So the rationale is that part of it's not Muslim culture, but is it? It might be Iranian culture that when you're trying to make amends for something, for past indiscretions or fights, you bring some type of gift. It could be pastries or dessert or something like that.
We overthrew your government. Here's a cake.
Yeah,
that's
something
shaped
like that.
like a key.
The cake wasn't shaped like a key. It had a gold key on the top of it. And the gold key is to symbolize like unlocking our future relationship or some shit like that.
They might as well have just brought a slate and a rag and been like, "Hey, let's wipe the slate clean."
No kidding. Well, what ends up happening is the cake doesn't even
You forgot
make
the
it.
other fun part.
What?
They brought over a Bible that had a handwritten note in it by Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, like I know you don't believe in what's in this book, but I want you to know that I'm also a man of God, not even your God.
Yeah,
so I'm going to tell you right
Allah.
now, hey, I'm a man of a different God. Like the one thing that you're against, here's a Bible. This is what you should be reading. Like I don't know what the point of that's supposed to be. So what ends up happening with the cake? I'm not sure what happened with the Bible. What ends up happening with the cake? Two of the guards that are like escorting them around end up eating like part of the fucking cake, so they don't even have it to like present to these. So
The Bible ended up, they handed it over to Gabanafar, and Gabanafar asked what it was, and they said what it was, and he just threw it to the side. Like, he didn't even open it up and read it. He's just like, what the fuck are you doing with this?
So nothing comes of this meeting because no one here is like the tastemakers to really. He makes some contacts and everything, but their intention to like also try to get the hostages back, nothing really happens. Basically, Gabanifar tells them though, he's like, if you start giving us weapons and shit, I could probably put some pressure on some people in the government, and they could probably put some pressure on Hezbollah, and we could probably get some of these hostages released.
Well, and that was contingent on him bringing Israel into this.
Yes.
Now, Israel plays a very weird part in this because Iraq, not Israel friendly. Iran, very not Israel friendly. So I got to think that maybe
They said one time when they were flying weapons in because they were flying them in from Israel.
it was Portugal that happened in, where
the
they
Star
turned the
David
shipment
was on
back.
it.
Oh yeah, well,
That was in Iran, where the Star David comes in and they're like, it's like loaded with weapons for them. They're like, we don't want this plane here. It's like all your shit's on it. They're like, we don't like what's on that plane.
well, we'll get to that. That was that was Gabanafar all over that. He had his hands all over that. But Gabanafar's like, hey, I have an in with Israel. Israel, I'm sure at this time was like, maybe if Iran and Iraq are fighting each other, they'll quit fucking with us for a while. So maybe let's see if we can play
And,
one or both sides
they're
of
making
this.
money off of it. So in short, what it is to try to skirt essentially the whole embargo with not dealing weapons to Iran, what they come up with, again, if Reagan knew or not.
Yes. He did.
Yeah. So North and McFarland basically come up with this plan to send weapons or sell weapons to Israel.
First, it was Israel sells weapons to Iran,
and then
America
replenishes their
replenishes
stocks, right?
all the Israeli stocks.
So we were selling to Israel, and then they were selling to Iran, but everyone was making money because everyone would sell them at a markup. So like and it sounds so crazy. It's like shopping at Costco when they were talking about, because that was one thing I was thinking about, like, how are they just getting access to all these fucking weapons? Because I'm not talking about a case of guns.
No.
These are literally hundreds of like high technologically
Thousands.
advanced missiles, like air to air, surface to air tracking,
Tomahawk missiles.
tomahawks and tows and all that kind of stuff. So it's not Costco. You don't get to walk in and load up your cart and just bounce out with your club card. So North would go to the military and buy them from the military, which apparently there was no screening. Like they were just like, okay, here's your fucking 50 missiles. What do
You
you
work
use
for
them
the
for?
NSA.
Wait, don't worry about it. He would then take those and then sell them to Israel at a markup, and so they'd be making money there. And then I think they would then sell them to Iran and make money there as well.
The American markup hadn't happened quite yet. Just to kind of set the stage on where this goes, because it goes really, really wrong before it ends up going right. And Gabanafar is the entire reason why this happens.
Yeah.
So August 85 is their first shipment. Everything goes super smooth. They ordered 96, and 96 got there. Everything was
First
good.
got to Israel.
Yep.
Then we don't fly them into Iran. It's not like we're like, hey, we're going to also help this way. We're done, technically, once they get to Israel, because, hey, Israel, these are for you guys, right? And they're like, yeah, that's right, they're for us.
Yep.
And then they then take them and fly them into Iran or transport them, however, whatever.
And the whole idea was this first one was a very small amount of missiles to see kind of how it worked. The second one was supposed to be the first. Iran was going to talk to Hezbollah. Hezbollah was going to release the first.
No, they asked for all of them. They thought that.
Yeah, they
thought
asked
they
for
were
all
going to get
of
them all.
course.
They thought they were going to get all 7 hostages.
No dice. They say one.
They get one.
So, and this second shipment is where everything starts to kind of change.
So, but that's after they release the first prisoner.
No.
Oh,
Nope.
it's not? Okay.
Second shipment was the first release of the prisoner. The second shipment was supposed to be 100 missiles, and Israel ended up sending 408 to Iran. And Oliver North is like, what the fuck did you guys do? You guys sent 4 times as many missiles as you were supposed to send to him? And Gabanafar is talking to him, and he goes, look, man, Iran's price went up. Iran asked for more, so we supplied more. You guys said 100. That was what your agreement was. Iran changed the deal. They wanted 400 now. So the first guy that they were going to release was that military agent that you were talking about.
This is the first guy they asked for. They weren't going to release him. So basically,
the first guy that they were going to release, he ended up being so sick.
they said he was sick.
Well, he died.
I know, but what's to say that they didn't end up killing him? They did see
yeah.
proof of life, like a photo and stuff, and he looked pretty like thin and everything. But when they asked for him, they're like, "We want this guy." They're like, "Actually, he's too sick to travel." You're like,
Well,
is he? Do you have a hospital there? Is he going to get better in a bed?
maybe you're right, because this was the same people that asked for 100 and then ended up asking
Yes,
for 400.
and so they're like, "Well, fuck, who do we ask for?" Well, the second guy that had the most publicity behind him was this preacher, pastor, reverend, or whatever it was, because his wife had been on the news being like, "I don't think the government's doing as much as they can." Like she's trying to be like nice about it. She's like, "I don't think they are doing as much as they can to get him released." They request for him to get released. Bingo. That guy comes back to the States. So his last name was Weir. He gets released. But they're still like, you're giving us fucking one?
And we sent you 4 times
Yeah.
as many missiles. Third shipment, this is where shit really starts to go wrong. And this is Gabanafar's just his.
Well, and he starts asking not
Peace
only for
resistance.
like more, but he's like, we want the good shit. Let's start going up in tiers. We need stuff that's able to like destroy tanks and like shoot down helicopters and airplanes and this shit.
It's still all Tomahawks from what I read. The third shipment was supposed to be 500 missiles. As the American flight is coming into, or not as the American flight, I believe as the Israeli flight is coming into Portugal. Portugal sees the 2 planes that they're on.
Why would they don't have to fly over Portugal? It would have to be when the Americans were coming in.
as the missiles are
At
headed,
some point for some reason.
yeah, are headed into Portugal, they just say no. They deny the shipment. They send the planes back. The planes get diverted back. I'm sure when they land, there was a real big talk about that. So this third shipment that was supposed to be 500 Hawk missiles, only 18 missiles show up, and every one of the 18 is engraved with the Star of David on it.
I have a theory about this. I don't think there was any type of shit that went down in Portugal because, first of all, I don't think that anyone from Iran or within this deal could probably like call someone in Portugal and be like, "Hey, did you guys stop our missiles?" I think what ended up happening is after they got one hostage back, that North and that council, whatever was, let's think of a name for them. What were they called? It was the Enterprise. It was something.
The Enterprise works for this.
Anyway. So we're going to call this group that's like running this the Enterprise. I know that that's actually a group that was in this, and I want to say it does apply to them.
Okay.
So anyway, I think they were like, we got one hostage, we sent them all this shit. No, we're going to send them 18 with the Star of David on it, and then we're going to see if they want to do business with us. Because if they just kept supplying it, like, what's to say they would keep releasing hostages and keeping missiles? If they're like, listen, you've only got 6 more people. If you're really talking... 6 people, and I get that they're American citizens. How many people can be killed by all the fucking missiles that you're sending? Like, you think that these aren't going to be used against other people. So you're knowingly saying that these 6 other people are worth more than the hundreds, if not thousands, that are going to be killed or could be killed by these weapons. Like, I'm sorry, but that's fucking dumb.
But when you hold all the chips, you get to make the rules.
I understand that, man, but then I hate to say it, and like, yes, I don't think that they should have been fucking taken hostage or anything like that, but you do have to weigh the cost of human life. You can't just say an American life, because you don't live somewhere, is worth 100 or 1,000 other people. Those are people with families. Those are people... I'm going to get fucking heated on this, but you can't say that. But these people that are in charge don't give a fuck. The people that are doing this, they don't give a shit. Especially Oliver North, because we're going to get to like how he views himself and everything during his like deposition and his Senate hearing. But so anyway, yeah, they send the 18 missiles. They show up, and then I forgot what the reaction to that is.
Iran went nuts.
Well, of course.
They were fucking pissed. And at this point, they realized, like, okay, this whole system with Israel not going so well. We probably need to just cut our losses and go a separate way. So after...
One thing. The Gabani Farm meeting, I forgot one big thing that they say, that the way that it went down is a little bit different. So there was still money that had to be paid to like the U.S. as part of this deal that Gabani Farm was going to pay during this meeting in Tehran.
Yeah.
And at some point, I can't remember if it was with McFarlane or if it was with North. I know also during this, Poindexter comes in, and is Poindexter part of this as well?
We're about to get to where McFarlane's like, I can't do this.
Okay,
I gotta retire.
that's what I was waiting for. But I know that during this meeting, at some point, Gabani Far or North or someone comes up with the idea. They say it was Gabani Far's idea, but he was like, we still have this money and everything. And for some reason, I don't know how he knew this or how they say he knew this, but he's like, why don't I just send this to the Contras for you?
Well,
and North was like, holy shit. He's like, I'm running this other operation. This guy's just offering to basically solve my problem of funding with this other fucking Contra operation. You know what? Yeah, why don't you do that, Gabani Far? I'm going to go ahead and have you send that. And I think it was something like $18 million. He's like, why don't you go ahead and send that to the Contras? Because this is money that the government, that people are never going to know. This whole thing people don't know about. So we're able to take this hidden money that's technically been paid for by the manufacturer and purchase of these weapons in the first place and send it to the Contras for support. So this is when the connection of the bank account that, what's the guy's name?
Seaboard.
Seaboard. So this is basically also where they start funneling, I think, this money into the Swiss bank account as well. And Seaboard is able to pull this money to continue funding the Contras. And when he was funding them down there, I know we're jumping back and forth between Iran and Nicaragua. This isn't just like weapons and everything. He sets up a resupply line to where he has an entire like fleet of aircraft.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're not landing at these Contra camps or like training areas. They're flying over in like repurposed like cargo planes or C-130s or whatever. And they're just kicking all these supplies out over the camps and parachute dropping them. And they're doing these flights constantly. So there are also other people involved here working on these planes and transporting these weapons. But sorry, getting back to Iran.
Yeah, just kind of to lead into that, and after all this has gone wrong, to expound kind of on what you were talking about in the beginning. So Gabanafar has made money on every single one of these transactions. The 500 Hawk missiles that were supposed to be sent to Iran, that money was already paid for. Gabanafar already took his cut of it, even though they only delivered the 18 or 19 or whatever, 18 I think it was. So as this money's coming back through, Gabanafar goes, why do we need to keep dealing with Israel? He goes, I understand that you guys are trying to do this under the cover of darkness. If it's found out anyway, it's probably going to look bad.
That's what's going to make people okay with it. Be like, well, they were selling them to Israel. I mean, so technically, and that was their whole thing to try to get out of it if they got caught.
Yeah.
They were just going to lean on the fact that we never sold weapons to Iran. What Israel does with those weapons that they buy from us, that's their business, and maybe we'll be like, hey, Israel, don't sell those to Iran anymore.
Well, and we're still, as this is happening, supposedly hostages are needing to be released, so it just seems fishy.
And Gabanifar can figure at this point, he's like, if I can cut out Israel, I can cut out their cut.
Well, and
what they're making, so then I can start making that too.
That's exactly what he did. And he told North, he goes, why don't you guys just sell directly to the Iranian government, like the more wing that was willing to
the
talk
same way
to
that
you?
They're selling to Israel.
Yeah.
Why don't you just make Israel Iran and sell directly to them?
If they can't find out about Israel, they probably shouldn't be able to find out about Iran. So let's do it.
You guys can find another way to get into the country. Come on.
He goes, you guys are sending over all these weapons. They keep raising the price. So clearly they need these. You guys mark your shit up, and then you send all of your markup or part of your markup down to the Contras. The Contras will then be supplied by the money that you're getting from Iran, but it'll only be the markup. So you'll be getting all the money back to be able to put it away or to keep resupplying, but all the money that you've marked up can then go down to the Contras and fund them. So Oliver North, what was it? He marked up the missile sales that they're going to start sending over by another $15 million. And on top of that, Gabanafar marked his shit up 40%. So Gabanafar's like, you're going to mark your shit up? Okay, you do that. I'm going to put a markup on your markup so I can make more money out of this deal too.
And that's the thing is you're like, well, how are they still affording all this? It's the Middle East. It is literally the largest supply of oil. It's why there's so much money there. It's why all of the fucking sheiks and all those people have so much fucking money. It's oil money. They don't care. They just want the fucking weapons.
At some point, too, way before this that we forgot to mention, Robert McFarlane, whatever his name is, he realizes that what they're doing needs presidential approval for what the the council is doing.
National Security Council.
Yeah. So,
okay.
He goes,
sorry. To go back a little further, I forgot to mention the Boland Amendment, how it prevented any agencies and we're in 85 now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so who finds out about the money going? They found out about a little bit of money, and that's why they do the second Boland Amendment.
Because they still saw the amount of money that was still flowing into the Contras.
Correct. And so how they explained that they were able to get past the first Boland Amendment without actually violating the amendment is they said, well, the National Security Council isn't an agency. And so no agency was providing money. It was the National Security Council. It was this separate. And they were like, bullshit. You know that was included in what we meant. And they even did a hearing or something on it. And they're like, it was implied beyond a reasonable doubt.
We didn't think you were this dumb.
Any operational entity within the government shouldn't be doing this. So then they craft the second Boland Amendment to basically shore up any fucking in the first one.
No holes in the dike.
So then they're like, hey, we told you 3 years ago, quit fucking giving money to the Contras. And so the second Boland Amendment passes. So that's, I think, where
it was the next year. They were consecutive years. It was 82 and 83 that the Boland Amendments were passed.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was within a year, and there's an interview of Reagan talking about the second Boland Amendment that they just put in, and he does that stupid letter. It's like, we actually weren't. I don't know how that money was getting there. It's like, yes, you fucking do.
Well.
Yeah, motherfucker.
So
McFarlane knows that in order for them to keep processing these weapons to Israel,
especially if they're going to have to start selling them to Iran,
yeah,
and that shit's going to possibly be found out.
So there's a handwritten, I don't know if it's a memo or whatever it would be from the president authorizing this to happen. That gets filed away. That comes in pretty crazy when we get to the courts. But yeah, so that's the plan, is Oliver North is going to mark up by about $15 million his sales to Iran. Gabanafar is slapping his 40% markup on what he was making anyway. Good for him. That guy's the fucking man. In between February to November of 1986, they sent over 2,000 missiles and miscellaneous weapons to Iran.
You just skipped over the whole point of you talking about McFarland.
No, talking about McFarland was just to authorize what was going on.
Exactly, but before even the markup on the missiles, and not long before that, back in like December of '85, McFarland gives his resignation to.
Oh yeah,
Reagan.
okay, yeah, I did skip over that.
And then to replace him, it was the laziest shit I've ever fucking seen. Did you see the White House announcement?
Poindexter was just, he had already been working.
He did it the same. It wasn't even like, hey, just letting you guys know, Robert McFarland is going to be resigning as my national security advisor. He literally had him on the right, and he turned to the left and he goes, replacing him will be, and Poindexter is standing right there. There was no, like, I'm not saying everyone should get a big send-off, but make it two separate fucking press conferences. Like, give the guy, like, that's retiring from public service, although he is a fucking morally questionable person, a little pomp.
It was like he looked over and he's like, which one of you guys am I going to choose? You come over here.
I think he looked and he goes, well, and then in that he made the decision. So this guy,
what's your name, son?
John Poindexter takes McFarland's place as the national security advisor. Now,
he jumped in with both feet.
Yes.
He was down to clown this whole entire time.
And you would think McFarland would be out at that point. No. At some point, Reagan also is like, hey, I know you just retired, but I need you for one more mission, and sends him back to Tehran for some type of negotiation or something. I can't remember the exact details of that.
He went over there with Poindexter, right? And
That's right. That's what it was. He went over there with Poindexter and also North. And then after that, he stepped away from it.
So that was where the markup happened. That was where they told them their new price.
There you go.
Then, like I say...
Look at that. It all just came together.
Ties right there. February to November in 86, over 2,000 missiles and miscellaneous weapons were sent to Iran. That is so many missiles and so much shit that they're doing over there.
That's the thing, too. You just say 2,000 missiles. You're like, that's a lot of missiles. When you also think of all the miscellaneous weapons and all that, okay, rifles, mortars, tons of ammunition, grenades, all that kind of stuff.
To fight a war.
Exactly. So before we go next, I think it's time for a bathroom break.
Okay.
All right. Pause in class. All right, while we take a break from class and take care of some business, you can also take care of some business.
If you don't follow us on Instagram or Twitter already, our Instagram handle is Historically High Pod. That's Historically High POD. And our Twitter is Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right, and back to our show. All right,
bathroom break's over. Everybody back.
Okay, so now we're at November 1986.
And this is where the shit starts hitting the fan in Iran. And... right around the same time. It's weird how all this stuff happened very close to each other, a world away.
Oh yeah, when it collapses, the deck, it's like a house of cards, man. Yeah. It all comes down very quickly. So there's I don't know what you would. It's not a newspaper, or is it? Because it
was a publication. It was like a magazine.
Okay, so it was called Al Shura, and it was in Iran, and it was run by.
It wasn't in Iran. I believe it was in Lebanon.
It was because he didn't like Iranians.
Yeah.
That's right. So it was a Lebanese publication. And is that his name?
That was the guy that was a part of the Ayatollahs.
Okay. People. I can't remember the name of the owner of Al Shura. I probably should have. But anyway, so he is approached by two members of we're guessing probably like either someone high up or someone that has information within the Iranian government. Mm-hmm. And he's like, hey, guess what we know? And the guy's like, what? He's like, we found out, or we know, that the United States is selling us weapons. He's like, okay. He's like, you want to run a story about it?
Yeah, maybe this will sound good. The guy who took the fall for the Iranian side of it, his name was Menadini Hashimi, and he was tortured and then killed after he was found out to be the one that leaked his story in Iran.
So apparently, maybe it was someone within the Iranian government that was actually maybe like on the trying to do some damage that was like a Shaw loyalist or something like that, possibly.
Could be. Yeah, maybe didn't want to be working with
Because there's no
America.
benefit to him leaking this story.
No. In fact, it was the opposite because he got killed for it.
And here's the thing too. Okay, you really think about it. It's a Lebanese publication. Wasn't it within the same day or a day after that Reagan does a press conference? He's made aware of this
I think
quickly.
I thought it was, he waited. I thought it was 10 days after this
It was
publication
close.
ran.
I know it was close. I don't know if it was 10.
There was some odd timing, though, to where I think it was 10 days because everybody's like, well, aren't you going to say something about this? And I'm sure he was talking to his publicist like, what the fuck do I say?
Before viral was a thing,
Yeah.
this thing goes viral as much as it can for a publication coming out of Lebanon. And I mean, it gets back to the States. Of course, there's also people within the government watching all these publications and for information.
Yeah.
And Reagan has to basically come on TV and be like, there is no truth to any of this. They're lying to all this kind of shit. And I think he related it. He said that he couldn't elaborate anymore because any information that they provided could potentially be detrimental to their ongoing efforts to release the hostages.
Yeah.
That was always his fucking go-to. Whenever he was asked about this, he's like, we can't discuss any details about this because it could disclose some of the operations to release the hostages.
I mean, it's not the dumbest thing to go with. Like, if you want
It's
to
the
try...
fucking easy thing when
Yeah.
you don't have an answer to the fucking question.
It really is. And there was some conspiracy that a member of the Joint Chief of Staff may have orchestrated the leak
To Iran and then had them
to Ashura. So I don't know. I mean, there wasn't really anything to confirm it. There was never a name placed on it.
Well, just when you think the stuff can't start coming down any quicker, let's shoot back over to Nicaragua, and the Sandinistas shoot down a plane, and so apparently they were talking about like what happened. So it was a cargo plane. It was one of the ones supplying the Contras.
Resupply plane had guns in it, had everything.
Broad daylight. It was flying at 2,500 feet. And these are slow planes.
Yeah.
They said, and the Sandinistas would have basically like patrols or like lookouts and everything armed with rocket launchers. And they shot this shit down. Well,
Hey, that's not one of ours. What is that?
oh yeah, that's definitely not one of ours. And out of the wreckage, or after they searched wreckage, there's no survivors. 2 days later, or a day later, they find Eugene Hassenfuss sleeping in a hammock made from a parachute that he had deployed after jumping out of this plane. He was the only one that had a parachute because he had borrowed it from his brother, who was a skydiver. And his family didn't know he was down running guns and dropping guns out. I think he had said he had gotten a job doing transport for something.
Always. Yeah, it's technically he was doing transport.
Do you think they were giving him shit, being like, "Oh, look at Eugene with his parachute"? And as he jumps out, he's like, "Who's laughing now, fuckers?"
You dipshits work for the CIA and you didn't bring parachutes? The CIA couldn't afford to give you 2 parachutes? Come on.
So on TV, the Sandinistas walk Eugene out of the jungle on a leash, like just something tied to either his hands or his neck to like lead him. And Eugene, with nothing to lose, he's got no stake in all this. Eugene explains everything he can.
Yeah, he spilled his guts.
Not only does that happen, the Sandinistas find the wreckage and they find 2 people who are confirmed to work for the CIA. These guys all had their fucking IDs and wallets on them. And they all had like business cards or something that pointed to a certain cargo company, but it was a cargo company that was very like easy to find out that it was a front for the CIA based out of like Miami.
Yeah.
So not only do they have all this, they have Eugene that's explaining all this. They find their safe house that they were operating out of. And upon raiding the safe house and going through the phone records, guess who they have a lot of calls to? Good old Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North's office. So all of a sudden, you now have everything in Iran coming to light about this arms deal that wasn't supposed to be happening. And now you have proof that the CIA is running cargo shipments of arms down to the Contras in Nicaragua. And shit just starts popping off in D.C. and Congress.
In a matter of days. Like, this wasn't like months apart. This was days that these things were happening. And you gotta think, for as long as they've been running it, everything kind of going right and going well, that for this all to fall apart as fast as it did, it's like, how how can this happen? Like, this had to have been fate that all this shit just went wrong at the same time.
So this basically kicks off a congressional investigation, and there's through the investigation, they basically are, coming into certain offices looking for things like that. At one point, they come into Oliver North's office. So at this point, there's no connection. They don't know there's any connection between the deal going on in Iran and basically the deal with the Contras. They don't know that they're connected by any means. They just think they're two separate fucking no-nos. A couple agents are going through or are searching North's office. They walk in, and he's shredding shit. He's destroying stuff. At this point, since they knew the reports came out, since the Al-Shara report came out, they had been destroying documents.
Oh, yeah.
So they come in, Oliver North and his secretary, I forgot what her name was.
I think it was Fawn Hall.
Fawn Hall, that's right. At one point, she shoves documents down the back of her pants and the back of her blouse.
And in her boots, anywhere that she could fit documents.
To try to sneak them out. So
Thank God
he's
she
shredding
wore underwear
documents.
that day.
The two investigators come in. He's like, hey, guys, just over here shredding documents. They're like, okay, we're just going to have a look around. They go through, I think in a separate room, not the one he's in, they're going through a bunch of documents. Early on in the process of the whole Iran-Contra funneling money, North needed a little bit of CIA help really early on for transport and everything. And so they were able to find like one memo and documents that basically linked. And they had, because the CIA has to document everything as a government agency. The memo basically linked and talked about the Iran deal. And then underneath that, it made a line about diverting funds to support the Nicaraguan Contras. And the guys looked at it and they knew what they had. They couldn't let on, though, because if they let on that they found something, then he's just going to go try to destroy it. And they can't remove the document because then he's going to know that it's gone.
Yeah.
So they put the document back.
Well, they probably didn't have a search warrant for it.
I would assume they made a fucking copy or took a picture of this shit because you couldn't risk that. And walk out after leaving the document where it is. That day they go to a meeting, and I can't remember. I think it was with Poindexter, the two investigators, and one more guy. I can't remember what his name was. But they're having dinner, and he's like, we found something big. And basically tells him, he's like, we've connected the going on with the Contras and their funding to the Iran arms deal.
What do you think Poindexter was at that point? You think he's like, what? No way. These two things are connected? Or you think he's like, hey, I got to put some shit on you guys?
He's like, what did you find?
Yeah. Like, what? Do you try to come clean at that point? Or
where did you find it? Exactly. And just for safekeeping, I'd like you to pass me all records, pictures, anything like that you guys might have said document.
I'm the NSA guy for the president. Like, you need to give me all this stuff. This is totally national security.
I'm the most national secure person
nationally securest person on the planet.
So basically when was it that it was the
So November 25th,
that's right.
The funding plan was revealed to the public by the Attorney General, who was Edwin Meese at the time. And of course, the same day that hits, all of a sudden Reagan's like, hey, this could be serious. We need to bring...
What do you mean the people that I wanted funded the whole time were still receiving funding? You mean that their continued success in the rebellion or their ability to stand there was not just coincidence? There was still money?
They must have really been the founding fathers for them to continue to do this. So Reagan enacts something called the Tower Commission. And,
headed up by a guy with the last name Tower as the commissions.
Yeah, Senator John Tower was number one. The other guy, and this was all, like, this happened the 25th that he called for the Tower Commission. Probably took Thanksgiving off. Don't know when it was that year. December 1st rolls around. Senator John Tower, former Secretary of State Ed Muskie, great last name, and the former NSA advisor Brent Showcroft were all put into this Tower Commission to look into the inquiry, or to start the inquiry.
And at this time, it now becomes the Iran-Contra Affair.
Yeah. Everything connects. This whole Tower Commission was kind of bullshit because basically what they were hoping to do was to figure out how to shift the blame from Reagan.
Yeah, they were trying.
Else.
The whole point was not to find wrongdoing. The whole point was to try to distance and sever any ties of wrongdoing to Reagan's knowledge.
Yeah. So, like a good president would, December 2nd, the very next day, Reagan appears before the Tower Commission, and he ends up saying in the beginning that he did authorize the arms deal before coming back to the line of questioning later on, and he had magically no recollection of signing any arms deal. It's very odd how you can admit to doing something and then in the exact same testimony be like, I really don't remember doing it.
I'm not sure the order in which it happened, but he also did, when he was talking about this, he did what do they call not a State of the Union, but it's what do you call it when the president just has an address, presidential address,
Yeah,
whatever.
That was after the tower.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm getting at is it's the same type of thing. He takes blame but doesn't take blame, and his whole thing in defense during this is, well, I knew about the deals, but I didn't know that the deals were being intended to as a weapons for hostages type thing. And you're like, motherfucker, then what was the fucking weapons for?
And not to mention,
if you weren't even doing it for the hostages, then you were just fucking doing the one thing that you told everybody else not to do and just directly fucking selling weapons to them.
You were also the guy that coined the term, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Yes.
And you are
if you've ever heard that, that's been the thing since then. The United States does not negotiate. How many fucking movies has that been in?
It's everywhere. And the fact that
you're not even negotiating, motherfucker. You're literally giving them weapons.
Signed, sealed, delivered. There's no negotiations happened a long time ago. We've jumped negotiations quite a bit. So 200-page Tower report gets issued February 26th in 1987. Probably should have
released it. So it took about a year, a little less than a year.
Yeah, probably should have released it in February 29th, because that's basically what this was. It basically said that for Reagan's part, his biggest issue was that he should have listened more to the advisors around him.
Is this when they said he was out to lunch?
He's shifting all the blame, or the Tower Commission is shifting all the blame to everybody else around him, that Reagan should have heard more, listened more, and asked more questions so he could have shut it down.
They basically said that if they're like, he's not guilty of wrongdoing because it's not illegal to be stupid. You're like, these are all, and here's the thing, man.
Should be.
These aren't even like, this isn't even at a time when we're like, J. Edgar with the FBI.
Yeah.
Where he's in another agency. There's not a lot of oversight. The president doesn't have direct. These are people within his fucking National Security Council. The guy's right fucking under him doing this. And so when they said that, yeah, they're like, Reagan was out to lunch, basically saying that he didn't know what the fuck was going on, but it's not illegal to be ignorant.
Yeah. So Tower Commission hits its point. Congress in 1987, I believe, may have been held in power by the Democrats. I'm not positive if it was. At least the House would be probably.
At the end of his term, it was, because they said that the election in 86 for Congress was the first time in his 6 years as president that he did not have a House that was Republican held.
Okay.
So anytime after 86, it was a Democrat both held Senate and House of Representatives.
So 1987, after the tower comes out, congressional investigation gets started. The congressional investigation was a little bit worse, and I don't think this was the first time that this term was ever used in politics, because it just feels like it's used every time somebody fucks up and doesn't want to get caught. They called it a partisan witch hunt. They said that this was the Democrats trying to ruin Reagan on his way out after such an illustrious, he wasn't 2 terms, was he?
Yeah.
He was 2 terms,
Yep.
okay. It was Bush afterwards, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So we haven't even gotten to that guy yet. Holy shit.
We got time, baby.
Yeah, they said that the Democrats were just trying to basically kick dirt on Reagan's name. Their findings were, if he didn't know, he should have known. So, I mean, this
isn't even 7 degrees of fucking Kevin Bacon. You don't have separation.
Yeah.
It's 1 degree to you.
It's the guy right below you that's tasked with giving you all the national security information.
When did he come
day.
out and throw people under the bus?
That was right after this. He he comes on, does another address, and this is where he says, I believe his exact wording, and maybe not verbatim, if I'm guilty of anything, which I definitely am, I'm guilty of caring too much about the people on the ground, because that was his deal. Was he wanted to take the blame. He wanted to take the blame in
an altruistic manner.
Well, in the optics of, I was doing everything I could to save these people in Iran.
The hostages, yeah.
Yeah. And so he basically frames his way out of like, this guy fucked up, this guy fucked up, this guy fucked up.
He names fucking names.
Yeah.
It's not like we're investigating. He's like, and this guy fucked up. It was Weinberger. It was also McFarlane, Elliot Abrams, Alan Fires, and
Claire George, I believe.
Oh, and then Oliver North.
Yeah, well, and this is where things get real interesting, because 1989, Oliver North's trial comes up after everything that happened, and this is where he hits with the lieutenant colonel.
Yes,
and talks about how he spills the beans on everything.
Okay, so leading up to this, I'm going to set the stage, which is going to explain some shit that I'm not happy about. During the investigation, when all this is going down, there's a certain number of these people that Reagan names that are granted immunity in exchange for their testimony.
Fawn was one of them.
North was one of them. And then he was
granted immunity in anything, I think, pertaining to the president, because he still goes on trial and he still was convicted.
He does, but he was granted a level of immunity. And then I'm trying to remember who else. So Secord was also there, and he chose to testify without an immunity deal. He didn't. A bunch of people took pled the fifth on this, so they didn't have to do anything. And then him and McFarlane agreed to testify without an immunity deal. Secord wanted to go first. And the reason that he wanted to go first is he wanted to be able to tell everything and set the narrative, because if he tried to then come in after two people had already gone and contradicted their story, but they had the same story, then it made him look like a liar and his story not correct. And he had a lot of information.
You always want to be first in a situation like this. You want to be
the
first one off
the story and let everyone else contradict you because it looks bad on them. So he goes first. I didn't watch the fucking hearing, so I'm not going to say I know what Secord admitted to, but I'm pretty sure he provided quite a bit of information. And then at some point, McFarlane went. Prior to McFarlane going, he tried to, a few weeks before, something like that, or a month before, he took a overdose of Valium that he had been prescribed due to all the stress and shit. And they came out and said that he had just taken a little too much because of all his back spasms or something like that.
He took like 11.
Yeah, I know.
How is 11 a little too much of anything?
Track, man. It could be little tiny things stuck together. I don't know. But he ends up getting to, like, they save him, go to the hospital, and he's survived. So he...
the saddest shit, and I don't even know if it's true, but I guess he wrote, like, a goodbye letter, set it on top of a stack of all the pertinent information that they were going to need to find to really wrap this case up. Like I say, I don't know how true this is.
He had multiple letters sent.
Yeah, but he pops the Valium. He's doing them one by one, essentially, and I don't know if this came from him or this was just sort of a dramatization, but he's drinking these Valium, or he's drinking a glass of red wine and swallowing these Valium with every swig that he takes. Mm-hmm. Then he goes upstairs and lays in his bed next to his wife. And his wife's like, "You look stressed out." He's like, "It's cool. Everything's going to be fine." And they just go to bed.
This is like almost shot for shot one of the episodes of Last of Us.
Really?
Where Nick Offerman and like the guy. It's a great episode. It's a great show.
But just, I don't know if that's true, but the fact that this guy was just like, "I'm going to end it." And then for them to come out and be like, "Hey, he over-medicated his bad back." Mm-hmm. Very odd.
And crazily enough, when he got up there, he basically just shielded Reagan the entire time and took all the fucking heat right after he tried to kill himself.
Which is a crazy move because he was already gone. Like he was out of everything. Like
he had helped set it up.
Yeah.
But I mean, he wasn't in it. And I'm not saying that, makes him better or anything like that.
He's still liable for what happened.
Exactly. It doesn't make him immune to it or anything. But he basically is like, Reagan didn't know anything. I felt it was my duty to go ahead and keep him isolated from this and just handle it myself. I felt I had the authorization to do it, and I felt that it was the right thing to do. So basically, he's taking all the fucking heat. Then good old Oliver North gets up. And instead of basically allowing himself to be questioned, just kind of goes scorched earth on everyone with his answers.
He had a story to tell, and it didn't matter what question.
And
you were
he's the
gonna
one
ask.
that started out and was talking about how he feels that like the American government has let down the people of like Nicaragua because we won't support democracy. Basically, he sets the stage from the beginning that this is like not a culture war, but like a political ideology type war between himself and this panel of senators that are questioning him. And he has different senators coming at him. He's making these like snide remarks. One of them says Lieutenant North. He's like, it's actually Lieutenant Colonel North. And he's given short like answers. At one point, someone asked him about memos that were related to notifying the president of this. And he's like, what happened to those records? He's like, I shredded them.
Well, and that was his move, was he got up and he said that between November 21st and November 25th, he shredded everything. Him and his secretary, Fawn, shredded everything. And not only did they shred everything, they shredded so much shit that it actually jammed the paper shredder. And anything they couldn't fit in the paper shredder, they put in a burn bag and he burned.
And
like that was
his
his answer to the question was, I fucked up everything.
And then when they asked him about it, he's like, I didn't buy the shredder.
Yeah.
He's like, the shredder was provided to me by the United States government to use to shred documents. He's like, I didn't choose to go out and provide the means of destroying documents. It was provided to me. I thought I should use it.
And not only that, he drops the big bomb of saying that Poindexter, he saw with his own eyes Poindexter take the memo that Reagan signed authorizing the arms deal, and he watched him burn it. So he immediately fingers Poindexter, whether it was him or not, whether it was North that did it, whether it was Poindexter that did it, wherever this signed piece of paper that Reagan signed to authorize everything, he says specifically that document, and then he says, I watched Poindexter burn it.
And here's the thing, too, is like, I don't know if he's just really good at what he was doing, but first of all, he's making himself, no one likes him. Well, actually, a lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people thought he was like fucking G.I. Joe and like the ultimate patriot because he was doing this stuff because he thought it would strengthen America and protect America. And it's like, so your line of rationale...
He's like the military pillow guy.
Exactly. So your rationale is that by providing weapons to Iran...
He's fucking Flynn.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Just the next generation.
Yeah.
He showed up in his greens and everything to... Just like Flynn did. But... So his rationale was he sold weapons to Iran so he could have money to fight communism in Nicaragua. And it's like... I don't know how your mind makes those leaps, that's like protecting all of our interests or anything. And at the same time, so he's turning people against him, and at the same time he's providing information that incriminates Reagan to where it's like a muddled mess of information. You're like, I don't agree with this, but how can I ignore that? But is that really true, or is he just trying to cause so much chaos? And the whole thing too, this is just to get information. Like, he had a level of immunity, which probably made him feel emboldened and being able to go in and kind of act like that.
Well, I also think that there were some backroom deals going on. Because after just the incredible amounts of testimony that were given during all these trials, Weinberger, convicted. McFarland, convicted. Elliot Abrams, convicted. Alan Fires, convicted. Claire George, convicted. Oliver North, convicted. I don't remember who else it was. I think that may have been pretty close to all the governments.
There's like 12 people 12 to 15 in total.
They were all then pardoned. Well, actually, Oliver North and I believe it was Poindexter, yes. Oliver North and Poindexter didn't need a pardon because they were actually, their convictions were overturned based on, I think it was the Fifth Amendment that they decided was violated by the courts. And so Oliver North was just let go.
What do you mean? They pled the Fifth and they still got questioned?
I don't know if it was that or maybe they incriminated themselves during testimony or something like that they couldn't do. So Oliver North gets his shit completely overturned. Poindexter takes his all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says that they're not going to overturn the overturning of his conviction. So he's just let off. All these other guys were all pardoned by the very next president that somehow came into power, George Herbert Walker Bush, who was then the vice president. So all these guys getting up and spilling the beans, I don't know if it was maybe Bush being like, hey, I don't give a shit about Reagan. I need to make me look good. But you guys pin it all on him. Don't ever mention my name in any of this shit. I will pardon you guys when I become president. All of a sudden, everything is good again. You guys are all safe. Say whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, and if you're going to say that Reagan didn't know about this, you have to understand that the vice president, if your point is, like we believe, Reagan was aware of what was going on,
yes,
then the logical assumption is that his vice president is also aware of what's going on. But the fact that this is just another example of there not being repercussions, it's a dog and pony show for like these hearings and these people admitting to this wrongdoing, and you're like, they get convicted, you're like, yes, and then you never hear anything because guess what? It never comes out, and it never comes out that there was pardons because they're done one at a time. They're done quietly, and then you think that there's repercussions for something. You think the punishment was doled out, and then you're just like, wait, what do you mean this guy never served time?
Well, I don't remember if it was Weinberger or McFarland that he did it, but he pardoned him before he even got sentenced. Like, he just immediately, like, he was found guilty. He's
Pardon.
like, okay, pardon. Don't even need to figure out what you were going to
say.
get.
He said, pardon.
Yeah. So all of this fuckery that happened in the government, there's only one person that actually serves time. There's the Iranian dude that got killed. A guy named Thomas Klein served 16 months, and it was for, like, just petty shit. So all this...
Did Seaboard?
I don't think he was a part of the military or like the government anymore.
No, he wasn't. But what I'm wondering is, did he serve?
I'm sure his immunity probably shielded him from a lot of shit.
He didn't have immunity.
I thought he did.
No, he chose to testify first without immunity, same as McFarland. McFarland chose to testify without immunity.
I didn't look to see what happened to him.
I would imagine with all the information that maybe he still had but withheld and could cause issues.
Yeah.
I could write a fucking tell-all book, baby, you know.
Yeah.
They're like, listen, keep your mouth shut and we'll pardon you. Because in the documentary that I watched, you have these guys, like, you don't see McFarland, but McFarland is actually like a talking head, but you just hear him narrating before he died, like in 2019, I think is when McFarland actually died. But you actually do get to hear Seaboard talking, and he's so fucking nonchalant and casual about it. Like, no, he has no remorse or anything like that for his part of it, because the way that he also described it, he was like, I was doing what I was told to do. I was hired for a job, and I was doing the job that I was told to do. So
this, it lends so perfectly into something that we kind of skipped over. And it's something that I plan on doing a little, maybe like a learning episode on eventually. But I really can't blame him for what he did, because he, like you say, he had a certain set of skills. He did that job to the nth degree. He didn't have any, I mean, there is like needing to be a good person and all that kind of stuff that would stop you.
I'm not talking about the right or wrong against America for this or that. I'm just saying from a moral standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
That, like, to not have any contrition, being a weapons dealer, knowing what you're doing and being able to be so casual, it's like I'm selling used cars, man. But, like, what you're selling is, you know for a fact that everything you're selling is most likely going to lead to the death of someone else.
You're transporting people killers.
Yeah, it's not even so much him not showing remorse about breaking the law. It's him just being so casual and so fine about, like, yeah, I used to do this. I used to sell weapons and people would die and all that stuff. He's like, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and that's where I get to, I brought him up a couple times before. Rick Ross, not the rapper. That's actually where Rick Ross got his name, and there was a legal battle over it.
Freeway Rick Ross, right?
Yeah, well, Freeway Rick Ross. Yeah, we'll get into that. But Freeway Rick Ross was just a regular dude in South Central LA. He was a small time drug dealer. Ends up getting connected with a guy whose name is Danilo Blandón. And Danilo Blandón was a Nicaraguan sympathizer with Contra, and he was a cocaine distributor.
Was he Nicaraguan?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Blandón was distributing cocaine to help the Contra forces with the money that he was getting back. Now, the CIA, the government will always look at this. I hate talking about this, because when I say shit like that and I preface it, I'm like, you sound crazy when you say this. But it's just,
We've
it really
covered too much shit regarding the CIA on this to think that anything you're going to say is crazy. This whole thing, come on.
Okay.
Just say what you're going to say.
So, Blandón was shipping cocaine through Central America up into Mexico, and then it was getting to America. Rick Ross ends up getting tied up with Blandón. just a very interesting guy to listen to an interview with. He says that he was hooked up with El Padron. He did some business with Colombia with the cartels down there, the Cali cartel and all that. He said the main distributor that he was getting from was Danilo Blandón. Danilo Blandón was bringing these shipments of cocaine up from Nicaragua, and it was getting across the border in such large amounts that there's no way that he couldn't have, like, this was a CIA protection racket to get this cocaine there.
Yeah.
He was selling
at the very most not doing anything.
Yeah, they were either giving a blind eye at the least, or they were shielding him and getting him across the border at the most. Yeah, it was just a caravan basically getting them up there. Rick Ross was making so much money. His goal every single day was that he was going to be selling $200,000 worth of cocaine a day. That was his plan. And give or take, who you want to blame for it, the cocaine that he was getting was then flooding the streets of South Central LA, but he was sending it all across the country. This was kind of like a Blow, George Young type deal, where he was making the bulk of his money by sending it east, where you couldn't get this stuff.
This was in the prime Nancy Reagan, war on drugs, just say no, all the fucking PSAs, all that shit.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to now explain to me that, because instead of looking into it, I wanted you to tell me about Nancy Reagan, the throat goat.
Let me tie up Ross real quick.
Okay.
So Rick Ross was buying this. He said he didn't want to deal with credit because he knew how Central American drug dealers worked.
Okay.
He knew how all that happened. He was buying cash every single day. He was getting drops from Blandón. And they talk about this perfectly in Snowfall, just how it all happened and who he was dealing with. But they were dropping enough off a day that his profit margin was supposed to be $200,000. All of Rick Ross's money that he's buying this cash up front is then being transported back down to Nicaragua, and that's helping to run the
Contras.
Yeah. So the CIA is a part of this as not only probably knowing what the fuck is going on with the Swiss bank account and Ollie Norsteele and all that kind of stuff, but then they're also turning a blind eye to the funding that they're getting from one of the largest cocaine distributors in the United States. The place where, like you were just talking about, Nancy Reagan is coming out with this Just Say No campaign and doing all this stuff. The president and the president's wife are pushing back so hard against drugs. Well, I don't know if they did know about it because it's kind of hard. Like, the rest of the governmental stuff I get, this might not have fallen into his purview.
It's what do you hate more? If you had to guess what Ronald Reagan hates more, would you say drugs or communism?
Probably communism.
Okay,
for
so
sure.
then maybe it's not so far-fetched. I'm not saying he knew about it, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
When he said, keep the Contras whole, body and soul, I don't know if he said whole and he rhymed it. But
body, soul, and whole?
He said body and whole and soul. At that point when he said that, I think he just kind of checked out and was like, as long as they're still fighting and as long as they have a chance to fight communism, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, it very well could have.
And I mentioned this to you the other. Good example of how Ronald Reagan was not on the ball. Usually when you're going to meet foreign dignitaries, when he went to go meet Mikhail Gorbachev, prior to them meeting, instead of the normal like dossiers, binders about all of that, I mean, they will hand them and it'll tell them everything about Mikhail Gorbachev. They had to make it into like a movie and a documentary so he would watch it. And be able to
he was a
learn from
movie
it.
guy. He was an actor.
I get that, but he also read scripts and had to do that shit.
That was what I was about to say. He was a script reader too, so
He had to have his words read to him and then read them back. I'm just saying that, like, everyone, Reagan has this weird spot on a pedestal.
This is why, though, because they had to try to do damage control on this shit, and that's why he looked so good. He wasn't all bad. He did some decent shit.
What's fucking crazy is this happened right toward the end of his presidency, and he still ended his presidency with like one of the highest approval ratings since fucking FDR.
Yeah, his approval rating when it first hit, though, dropped to, I want to say it was like 42, 46, something like that. So not very great. But then his apologies and his half-ass taking the blame for stuff endeared him to the public, and he left pretty happy. And that's why you still see, this is just a weird side rant that I'm not going to go into, but if you own a t-shirt or anything like that that has any sort of presidential thing about it, like whether it's an Obama chain shirt, whether it's a Reagan Bush shirt, anything like that, you care too much and you need to take a step back.
Yeah.
Like we're just too far. These people are civil servants.
It's fandom. It shouldn't be a fandom. It shouldn't be love your sports teams. There's so many of them we can choose from and everything. But like when liking something either makes you go against 50% of other people, just be like, hey, like it's the thing that's so easy. Let's just figure this shit out. Let's all compromise and everything, and just have that 60 or 70%. All of us meet in the middle and figure out something instead of letting all the fucking craziness on the outside be like, no, do this, do that.
Let's not forget with sports fandom, we don't vote for who
you.
Huh?
You
Oh
can
yeah.
do-
With sports fandom, we don't vote for who we or who plays
Correct.
for our team. We vote for these motherfuckers to have this position.
Yes.
That's enough of your support to vote for them. We don't need to wear shirts and
guess
bumper
what?
stickers. And
Be a fucking adult. And if your person fucks up, say, I don't agree with what they're doing. I don't like that. You can say that and not seem wrong, because guess what? You can love TGI Fridays, and you can go to TGI fucking Fridays, and if the potato skins aren't as good as they usually are, you can say, God damn it, TGI Fridays. Bad night, yet an off night, TGI Fridays.
yeah, I was man enough to admit that my lifelong fandom of the Packers just had reached its point. And that's why I'm a Bills fan now, because I gave them all that I had, and I realized that they were just going to keep fucking me, so I walked away from the table. And that's okay to do. It's okay to do in politics. It's okay to do in fucking anything, really. I mean, if you think about it, any time in life, if somebody's doing something that you just don't agree with, it's okay to walk away from the table.
Okay.
But
I agree with that.
just along that same line, all this stuff is coming in to the country as far as drugs and everything, that the crack epidemic is going crazy. Nancy Reagan comes out with Just Say No. One of her big pushes in the beginning was to try to get athletes on board as spokespersons or spokespeople for Just Say No.
Oh, who did I said Clint Eastwood was the one I saw, right?
Yeah.
That I showed, and
You got Clint.
He holds up a tiny vial and he goes, "This here's crack cocaine, the most dangerous drug in existence. It's like it's taken over our streets and our children."
Where is Clint Eastwood on the bulk of the issue that's going on is the black community in these lower income neighborhoods where the crack epidemic is fueled? Where is Clint wow, I almost said Clint Eastwood. Where's Clint Eastwood
Where is
on this?
Clint Eastwood?
Like, black people aren't identifying with Clint Eastwood. And the same thing Reagan did when she brought in the NHL players and Wayne Gretzky.
Hold on a second. You're telling me that the whole point of Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign was wrongly targeted
At
away
white
from
people?
black people?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, man.
Weird how that happened.
Yeah, weird that it wasn't fucking Michael Jordan or fucking Wilt Chamberlain at the time or someone like that, or they
Yeah,
didn't have a plethora
Kareem.
of different ones.
Kareem being in LA could have done so much good for that whole entire thing, but Lou Alcindor was not a part of it.
Okay, we're getting too far to the crack
Yeah,
epidemic. We don't need
but
this episode.
just as far as that goes, like, you have the presidency coming out and saying no, well, they're maybe knowing, maybe not knowing. I'm sure asked where maybe this is all coming from and found out. Like, they're pulling this campaign out. Is that like altruistic?
Casey, the
like,
head of the FBI, I can't remember his first name, but it's John Casey. Casey is
yeah.
his last name. He was like there with Reagan and also had a very close relationship with Reagan.
yeah.
So yeah, it's fucking filthy all
Okay,
over.
so yeah, just to get to Nancy Reagan
Okay,
real
hold
quick.
on. Before we get to Nancy Reagan, because it's such a deviation
Yeah.
from the topic, and maybe everyone doesn't want to listen about Nancy Reagan's.
I'm going to do
legendary
less
blowjobs.
than 5 on Nancy.
I understand that. What I'm going to do is we're going to say this. We're going to go ahead and let class out early for people that don't want to hang around for extra credit. So this is going to be, going forward, our discussion of Adam teaching me, because I've heard about this, Nancy Reagan, her legendary ability to pleasure a phallus.
Just, yeah, she used to suck the chrome off of a trailer
Okay,
edge.
if you're here for Iran-Contra only, stop now. We appreciate you listening.
Yeah, I just wrap up real quick. I mean, we see different things with Reagan. As far as 1994, he was fully diagnosed with Alzheimer's. There were different interviews that were done with him in congressional hearings in the early 90s. I want to say like 1990, where a lot of this stuff was brought up, and you could kind of tell with the way that he was answering questions and kind of like skirting subjects. He definitely may have been on some sort of a mental decline. I'm not saying that while he was president, but I'm not saying
I'm
that.
on her side on this, and what I'll say is this. Think of like, and I know that 90, for some people, 94 seems like it's a long fucking ways back. But if you're thinking about like cognitive impairments and everything, in the 90s, the diagnosis of that, especially for someone like the president, they probably wouldn't put that stamp on him as an official diagnosis until they had no other choice, which means that there was probably a very good chunk of years dating back 5, 8, 10 years, maybe even into his presidency, where he was suffering the early effects of dementia. Or not dementia, Alzheimer's.
And I'm not saying that this is what's going on now, but potentially in 10 to 15 years, we could be seeing the same thing. Where there may have been some cognitive decline because we keep electing old people to being president.
We can't discuss that right now because that's fucking ridiculous that there's not an age limit.
Yeah.
Terrible. You can't drive after a certain point. You shouldn't be in charge. You shouldn't be steering the goddamn country.
Yep, exactly.
After a certain point too, and it should be well before you're canceled for driving. Okay, are we gonna let some people out?
Yeah, I would just say, this isn't trying to bash Reagan or anything like this. Any president in this position would have certainly fallen
we don't
under.
have to try hard.
Yeah, we didn't have to look hard into this to be like, this doesn't quite seem like it adds up. Like, Reagan seems like he might be a little bit off of his rocker, but he definitely at the same time knew far more than was ever really attributed to him. Same thing. We'll talk about the Bushes eventually in an episode, but GW was definitely more a part of this and somehow skirted it.
We'll cover
president.
the Iraq conflict, and Desert Storm.
We'll cover all that stuff. But just to kind of put a little bow on it, excuse me, anytime we get things from the government, you always have to kind of run some critical thinking on what's going on. This kind of fell under the lock and key secretive shit that goes on that we don't ever really find out about until something goes wrong like this did and we find out about it.
That it would still go on till it naturally just ended had no one ever found out about it.
Yes,
it's not like
exactly.
These guys were ever like, we're only going to do it for this long, a little bit longer. It's like, no, we're going to do this shit for however long we can.
So yeah, you can't question anything, or you can question everything the government says, but you really have to like put some critical thinking into what's going on to really look at it. This, for me, has always really not passed the sniff test, and I really love it because it's kind of like the intersection of politics and conspiracy that I can really get on board with.
It's not a conspiracy, dude. It happened.
But there still are, like, levels to this.
There's branches off of it where you can get... But, like, I mean, the fact of the matter is the facts themselves make everything pretty clear.
Yeah, pretty cut and dry as to what happened. But, yeah, just something that I feel like really we don't talk about a whole lot because I don't know if the PR campaign to bring them back was great, but this is a pretty fucking big deal for the country and a pretty big deal for the president to be involved in, and we just sort of let it go.
It's because nothing bad happened to us.
Yeah, it was beyond our borders.
Bad shit
That's very true.
No one fucking cares.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad shit happened to us. We lost a few $1 million. Like I think they said when it came out, they're like, we found during the hearings that roughly like 10 to $15 million had been diverted. That's what they fucking knew about. The money that they never saw coming from fucking Iran or Israel or whatever.
Or Rick Ross or really anybody. We don't know those total
that amount
numbers.
Was...
And we never will.
No.
Probably for the better.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Adam, tell me about the blowjobs.
Yeah, so for everybody that's getting off, thank you for listening. We will catch you again next week. Goodbye. Peace. Now for the extra credit portion of this.
Class After Dark.
Nancy Reagan seems to have had a very promiscuous past that I really tend to enjoy hearing about because it's very funny. And really how this whole thing came to light was... I don't remember if it was like last year during National Women's Month or whatever, but somebody higher up, I don't know if it was government or somebody kind of government adjacent, posted this meme that says be more like Nancy and be less like the chick that banged JFK.
Marilyn
Monroe. Yeah, it was a picture of Marilyn Monroe and it was a picture of Nancy Reagan. It said,
trying to like compare
be more like Nancy and less like
class.
Marilyn. Yeah. And it came out that Nancy Reagan blew like 3/4 of Hollywood while before she met Ronald, and I don't know if it stopped after, but we do know that Ronald Reagan obviously was a very big movie star. He was a pretty big deal in California. Nancy Reagan would go to these parties, and she is nicknamed the Throat Goat because she sucked dick so good that she was blowing everybody in Hollywood. And so as soon as this
set in the mood.
as soon as this meme comes out, everybody's like, well, there's no way that this could be real. Like, there's no way that this could be happening. Nancy Reagan was a very wholesome woman, just say no to drugs and all this stuff. And I guess it was just something that was never brought up. But this was like a widely known thing in Hollywood that she blew just a ton of different dudes. And the fact that she was able to bag herself so much kind of parallel between what's going on in England right now with the chick that's married to the new king, Camilla.
Oh, yeah.
When she was like the side chick for, I think it's Prince George or King George.
Yeah, when he banging her behind Diana's back?
Yeah, which is shocking because she is a woman that is just very less attractive than Princess Di.
She's got strong features.
Yeah, she's a sturdy broad. And with them, as weird as, did you ever see the text thread between King George and Camilla?
Charles, I think.
Or King Charles, yeah, and Camilla.
No.
When he's talking about wishing that he was her tampon and he could just be shoved up her vagina and be in there all day. It's totally
I'm finding out so much stuff.
It's like Step Brothers when she's like, yeah, I just wish I could ball you and shove you up my... I could feel your hairs, like it would be ticklish.
In my vagina.
All that kind of stuff, yeah. So that was, I guess, like... how that all went down with them, but it draws so many parallels to Nancy Reagan.
Him and Nancy didn't get together till like later in his life before he was governor, or he was governor of California, right?
Yeah, I think it was right around that time that they started hooking up and getting married.
So she had a lot of time before him.
Yeah.
And a lot of time to hone her craft.
You got to
bag herself a governor. That mouth, that governor... freaking finding mouth.
Yeah, dude, there's not a lot of sexual things that could bring you to the heights.
Is Nancy Reagan dead?
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not that I hope she's dead. I hope that she didn't live to see this get out.
Well, I just don't want to be talking about someone's Nana if she's still alive.
Well, and that's unfortunately a fact that Nana...
Nope, 2016.
Nana does
Rest
do
in
these
peace,
things.
Throat Goat.
Yeah, R.I.P. Throat Goat. But she actually got that reputation that, like, if you were going to a party and Nancy Reagan was going to be there, you were going to get some top and it was going to be, like, grade A primo.
Do you think Wikipedia, just curious, has anything related to Nancy Reagan on that?
About her D-sucking abilities?
Well, yeah. I mean, technically, it's, free user-based, and everyone participates in it. I mean, if there's enough influence in the White House, you think that mouth was making policy?
Well, and the fact that Wikipedia couldn't even go through and, like, check it and take it off because it was, like...
Here's the thing, too. I'm not sex shaming Nancy Reagan.
No, good for her. We don't sex shame on this
fantastic. I think Nancy Reagan, able to work her way up through Hollywood by an any means necessary, roll your sleeves up mentality, and then to bag herself the governor after doing that, despite maybe having a reputation that she was that good at her craft.
Ronald had to have known beforehand.
And I'm not... Here's the thing, too. Who's to say that Ronald would have even had that clarity of mind to get into the White House and be able to run that campaign had Nancy not been there, helping take that stress away.
Had he not been
overnight.
getting sucked off like he was.
Maybe that's why he was so out of it all the time. I think we have stumbled upon a possible
She sucked him into Alzheimer's.
I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say that's the reason why he was looking all spacey, like he lost his car. He was always being like, I'm so tired. Why am I always so tired? He's like, where's Nancy? Nancy, where's Nancy?
Even better, that's what I always looked like it because she was sucking him off, and he'd go out there and be like, "I don't really care."
Yeah, I don't know
anymore.
He was in that post nut clarity and just was ambivalent and stuff. He's like, "What are you going to do about the hostages? The hostages. We're working hard to get the hostages back. We're doing everything we can. I'm thinking of sending Nancy over there to try to get these hostages back."
Yeah, Nancy could be the diplomat.
Nancy could have got those hostages back. All right. Well, thank you for teaching me about that.
Yeah, no, great story, great lady.
And if you decide to hang around, thank you. If that wasn't your cup of tea, we're not always going to do that, but it's just fun to add that kind of shit in these episodes. But if I know our listeners, I think they enjoy those kinds of facts that maybe they weren't aware of. It's history.
It is truly history.
It's a key pivotal moment in American history when we found out that Nancy Reagan was the greatest at something.
She was the throat goat.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for sticking with us. 2 more days before your weekend or whenever you listen to this. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit him with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.